Hi class. This week you will be working on reader response number 4, which is a little different from the others, so I'm going to talk about it in more detail. You also have the opportunity to comment on your classmates' blog post from last week to receive extra credit. Remember to provide substantial and respectful feedback if you wish to earn the full 10 points. Finally, you have an extra credit quiz this week which will cover the reading in the Norton Anthology. For this reader response, I've asked you to choose 2 poems from your book that address the same theme. Remember, when you are looking at a poem's theme, you start with the subject. For instance, motherhood in the 2 poems that I'm going to talk about. However, then you need to make a claim about the subject to really articulate the theme of the story or poem. So I'm going to use the example of the 2 poems on page 502 and 503 of your book, Daystar by Rita Dove, and To a Daughter Leaving Home by Linda Pastan. The book tells me that both poems are about motherhood, so they have a similar subject, so I'm sort of starting with an advantage. If I want to come up with a thesis that compares how they address the theme of motherhood, I first need to read the 2 poems and do a comparison. So what I made is a simple T-chart that compares the 2. What I noticed is that they are different in several ways and similar in others. The differences are the points of view. Dove's poem is in 3rd person, and the speaker is not the subject of the poem, the mother. And Pastan's speaker is the mother, speaking in 1st person about her experience with her daughter as a direct addressee. So I automatically see that Dove is creating more distance in her poem. Then the tone is obviously different. I labeled Dove's tone as detached and dissatisfied, and Pastan's as nostalgic and loving. Additionally, the physical form of the poems is different. The lines and stanzas in Dove are longer, while the lines are short and the poem moves quickly in Pastan. The similarities between the poems are that they both use vivid imagery, they are metaphorical representations of the experience of motherhood, and they privilege the point of the view of the mother over the experience of the child. So I'm now going to use that information to create a thesis statement. I might say something like, both Dove and Pastan address the theme of motherhood, but from vastly different perspectives. Dove's subject is looking forward to the seemingly interminable span of her children's lifetime, while Pastan's speaker is looking back at a period in her life which has passed in a flash. Since what I have noticed is that Pastan's speaker is looking to the past as her daughter leaves home, and Dove's subject cannot even see the future as she is so mired in the difficulties and the smallness of her present, this allows me to use all of my observations about the differences between the poems as my evidence to support this thesis. For example, the long lines in Dove represent the long days of motherhood, while the short lines in Pastan move the reader through the poem in the same way that the speaker has experienced the quickness of her daughter growing from a small girl on a bike to the girl leaving the house. That's basically your task. Find a similarity in the theme of 2 poems, then find how they are addressing that theme differently. Remember, try not to conflate the speaker and the author. They are different. Let me know if you have questions.